This is True North Story, the original podcast series. Learn, love, listen, live. With your hosts, Tama Fulton and John Hudson Messerall. Are you ready to discover your True North Story?
I can feel your halo. I can see your halo. I can feel your halo. Halo. I can feel your halo. I can feel your halo. I can see your halo. Halo.
Hello?
Hey, is this Kris?
Yeah, what's up?
Hi, Kris. It's Tama and John.
What's going on?
What's up, John?
I can't believe that you were playing ping pong in my neighborhood.
I know, totally. I love those guys. I love those guys.
Such a small
Love those
world.
guys.
You're all about transparency and authenticity and storytelling and creating a mood and emotion through your music. And at True North Story, our podcast, we love to give inspiration and motivation, encouragement, and hope to our audience through the lives of our guests. And it seems to me like you have been on a trajectory, and you're still going, to create amazing stuff for people to listen to and resonate with. And so we just wanted to find out more about who Kris is and what makes you want to get out of bed in the morning.
Cool. I mean, coffee is the first thing usually that gets me out of bed in the morning.
You are not alone.
Yeah, it's cool to talk to like-minded people, that's for sure.
Did you grow up in a musical family, Kris? How did music become a living thing to you?
That is an interesting trajectory. In the music industry we live in now, it's really hard to monetize your art. And I didn't really ever think of it as a trajectory for me. When I was 3 years old, my dad propped me up on the piano at church, had me sing a song he wrote called Papa, Won't You Tell Me About Christmas. I was kind of around music from the beginning. I guess music was more of a thing when I was young. In college, I started doing the open mic because I went to London and studied abroad, and I found out I really loved music beyond being the drum major in the marching band or the saxophone player in the jazz band or whatever it was. Actually, because it was always kind of just a thing for me. And then after college, I realized that maybe it could really be a career. I got a band together through Craigslist, and yeah, what?
I love that. You got a band together through Craigslist?
Yeah, I just put an ad in Craigslist and found some guys, and then over time, it evolved to different people, but found some guys that would want to do what I wanted to do and liked what I was doing.
Looking for a bassist wanting to jam?
Exactly. That's probably exactly what I said, to be honest. I found some guys, and we started playing, started to learn a lot about the music industry through that. That was kind of a big undertaking, because whenever you kind of get into a new career, there's this huge ramp up of information you got to learn. And, everything from booking shows to just getting better at music and understanding all of the players and, building a team around your music and your art, and how to release music and how to record well. And it's just all of these different facets to it. It was really cool to learn it all. And then I released an EP with a string quartet, and that's kind of what brought me onto the radars.
Were you musically inclined right out of the gate? Was it something that you worked at? And was it an instrument that you learned first? Or kind of how did that process work? Obviously, you said your dad kind of threw you to the wolves in church, so to speak, and go out there and sing my song. Wow, talk about pressure.
Yeah.
So what was that like?
I kind of just eased into it, I think, because I just naturally knew how to sing as a kid, because I was around my parents all the time. And they were like wedding singers, actually. When I was growing up, they were just like a wedding singer duo. So it just seemed kind of like run-of-the-mill for me. So the singing was kind of second nature, but then taking on an instrument, a buddy of mine wanted me to play bass in his rock group, which was more like a soft rock group. We were in middle school. And so I kind of started plunking along there, and I picked up an acoustic guitar my dad had and learned John Denver, Country Roads, through tabs and him teaching me a couple chords. And so it kind of just went from there, but I was around it enough, and there was enough people in my life besides my parents that were also cool, we should do this over the years. And I think it kind of kept me going and kind of had me want to invest more time in it. But it wasn't, I think because I was around it so much as a kid, I never really considered it as a main thing for me for a long time.
So you went off to school to London. What was the driving force in leaving the States and jumping the pond? Was it studying music or was it something else?
I did community college for 3 years. Right out of high school, I was like, I just want to play soccer. That's all. That was like one mind. I was a pretty simple kid. So I went to college, community college at Skagit Valley Community College in Burlington, and played there for 2 years, and then got my AA finished up in Bellingham, where I'm from originally. Then I really wanted to go to London. It just seemed like this magical place. I had dated a gal whose mom was British, and I was just fascinated by it when talking with her mom. And so I was like, I think I'm going to go study there. And I just kind of decided one day I was going to do it. And so when I got into Western Washington University, I did my summer program there, like a set of classes, so that in the fall I could go to London. And I studied there for about 3 months, played soccer for the University of London. But then something happened where my host dad had an acoustic guitar, and he said, hey, do you play? And I was like, yeah, actually, a little bit. And so I started playing like almost every day when I was there. And that was when I was like, wow, I think, you can kind of just feel it when something resonates. And it was like, oh, this feels different than other things. Maybe I should kind of take a step back and think about this more. And throughout those 3 months in London, I realized that it was something that I wanted to pursue more seriously. I didn't necessarily know it was the thing still, but I knew it was something special for me.
Were you writing lyrics at the same time? Were they poems or stories or anything like that?
Yeah, I wrote lyrics. Like the way I write like a melody first usually, or I'll hear a melody in my head, or not a lyrical melody, but just like a melody line, a vocal melody line. And then I'll pluck out guitar chords to it or something, or I'll just hear something that sounds really cool on guitar, and immediately like a melody will come from that, or I'll hear something over it. So it's pretty quick once I hear something I like to start working on it. But then I usually get stuck in the lyrics because I don't always know exactly what I want to say.
Walk us through that process a little bit, Kris. I mean, because obviously that's I'm a writer myself and write screenplays and pilots and teleplays, and anyone who writes anything, whether it's music, a feature article or a screenplay or a book, parts of them make it into that work. It's impossible to not put parts of yourself, your own fingerprints in there in different ways. So What's that process like when it comes to writing music? How do you put parts of Kris, or how much or how little, or what's important to you into the lyrics and the music that you write?
To be honest, that's like the only way for me to write. I can't really write without it being somewhat personal. There are parts, that can be fictional as long as it still feels real, but that's like the basis of my writing, is it has to like come from a real place. I've written for TV and film, and so like write about something like this, and I was like, okay, how can I make this personal to me? Because then it will resonate. Then I can actually write about it. Otherwise, I feel like the songs usually just aren't as good if I write something that isn't personal to me. That's where it starts, making it personal.
And I would think too, Kris, that comes through your performance too. You know what
Absolutely.
I mean? If there's a deeper meaning and passion there, it just carries forward not only from the writing and everything, but into the performance on stage or in the recording studio or wherever.
You can hear those songs on the radio that are like that feel real, because the person singing them, they're just more passionate. You can hear it in their voice, whereas the songs maybe that don't mean as much, which can still work really well depending on what you're using it for and how you're delivering it. Those can still work, but I think it's partially a personal preference, the ones where it resonates with people, where their passion kind of shines through.
So talk to us a little bit about how did you bootstrap this whole EP, this whole thing where you came back from London and said, okay, I'm going to put an ad on Craigslist and I'm going to start making music and see if this works? Yes,
I did that for a while. I had like a 3-piece band for a long time through Craigslist, and I had a couple members go in and out of the group. But when I was in college at Western, I kind of got my chops through the underground coffee house, playing up there and just like sweating bullets and being totally red in the face and like playing the most awkward, nervous songs,
right?
Performing. And I met this guy named Andrew Joslin, who's become one of my closest friends. He's one of my groomsmen at my wedding, and he's better known for his work with Macklemore. He did all the string stuff for Macklemore, but he's kind of known as the string guy in Seattle. Before that, all of that kind of took off in his career, the two of us were in separate bands, and we'd done a lot of touring together, where just play a lot of shows, his band and my band. And so one day he said, hey man, I really love your stuff. I'd love to collaborate with you. I was like, oh, I don't really know what that means, I guess. Like, I've never done that. But okay, sure, yeah, whatever you think. And then we ended up getting together, and he did this whole string arrangement around the songs I'd already written. It just made the songs, it took the songs to a whole another place. And we said, wow, let's do an EP together. And so we brought in a quartet at the Fremont Abbey in Seattle, a live taping of it. It's one of those aha moments where you go, wow, that was my first big foray into collaborating with somebody. And now I'm actually a songwriter who collaborates a lot. I'll go to Nashville and LA and do trips, but that was like the first aha moment in terms of me for my another side of my career, going, oh, collaboration, this is cool. I wonder what I could do with this, and then ended up landing a publishing deal and starting to co-write and write songs for other people as well as myself and for TV and film. It's really cool. It's really cool being able to start in one place and find yourself on a whole other place and go, oh, wow, this is how I got there. Cool,
So one of your songs has been on Grey's Anatomy, right? Another Seattle-based show.
Yeah.
Tell me about does somebody say, hey, we'd like you to write for our show, Kris? Or how does that work?
Mm-hmm. I had a couple interns for a while for the band. At one point, I had up to 7, which is kind of crazy. 1 in Arizona, 1 in LA, and then 5 in Seattle. The goal was to have more people helping me get the word out about my music while also helping to support their careers, teach them about the music industry, help them get jobs if they did a great job working with me. One of my interns, who now works at Red Light Management here in Seattle, said, hey, she was so savvy. She goes, Kris, why don't you send this to this music supervision company in LA? And I was like, oh, okay, sure. So we sent it off to this company called Chop Shop Music, and they're the ones that decide what music goes in what shows. For like Scandal and this new show with Kiefer Sutherland. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to talk about that actually, but there's a couple shows that they're known for. One is The OC and one is Grey's Anatomy. And at the time, they found my stuff unsolicited kind of thing where they just happen to open the CD and listen to it, which doesn't happen as much anymore. So I got kind of lucky in that way. And they emailed me and said, hey, we love your stuff. We love this new album. Can we put one of your songs in Grey's Anatomy? And I was like, yeah. You can definitely do that. It helped pay for the whole record. It started this really great relationship with this gal named Casey Truman, who had reached out, become one of my best friends in the industry, and she's a big reason why I was able to have a career in music. She helped me sign a publishing deal. She's the admin. She's just been a huge kind of believer in my music, and it's opened a lot of doors for me.
We kind of hear a recurring theme that sometimes we need an advocate, or we need a collaborator, somebody who helps us. And it sounds like Casey was that person that just kind of helped you realize, take your dream and make it even more of a reality. How important is that? You mentioned collaborating earlier as a new angle in your musical journey, so to speak. Right now, with the way the music industry is, it's just got to be very difficult as an artist to kind of cut through the noise and get your music out there in a way that, one, to your point, can make money and pay for itself, but also have the passion and the art that you and the impact that you want it to have. How do you manage that? I mean, it's got to be pretty daunting. I mean, gone are the days when super bands would go out and do a 18-month tour and make millions of dollars playing 5 nights in a row in one city.
Yeah, I mean, the question right there. I don't really know how other people do it, but I can only answer how I do it. It kind of depends on the week, the month, the year. I've got a really good team behind me. In this industry, it's kind of like here today, gone tomorrow, and there's a really strong need for having a lot of advocates in your corner, because you have to have a lot of things happening at once to see success, to make a living. I've found that I can't do just music most of the time. I have to be doing something else to make money. Early on, I started consulting. I was a marketing consultant for various companies, Microsoft for a long time, a little bit for Google, doing some project management stuff for them. And now I'm actually with Amazon doing work with them, kind of a support role. There was about a year, February to February of 2015 to 2016, where I was doing just music and I was writing a lot. And part of the reason I was able to do that is because I'd landed a couple big licenses and was able to kind of pay off the last record and had a little bit of savings after paying out everybody else. Now it's like I kind of have to wait for the next big license to come in, or it's hard. It's hard to sustain that. And
is that the new reality, Kris? For a lot of musicians, you're going to have to balance some other sources of revenue along with your passion and your art, because that's probably true of most people who are in creative endeavors, whether it be acting or, writing or musicians and musically related things. Is that kind of just the world we're living in now?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's a couple key denominators, right? There's living within less of a means so that you can afford to do that, kind of live paycheck to paycheck, or kind of build your career until you get to a spot where you're making enough money, where you don't have to worry about that. I think the other thing is that a lot of people, so I teach a kids songwriting camp every summer, and I always tell the kids, like, you guys are great songwriters. I have amazing people in the class that are like signed to big major label deals or, or YouTube stars or whatever it is. But I always tell them, don't quit your day job until you have to, as you're getting older and you get jobs, you're getting to that point, like, you can still make art, even if you're not doing it as a career. But I also tell them, do a lot of different things. It's like I think it's like the financials, advice that people give you, like diversify, which is like I don't just tour. I also write songs for other people, and I write songs for TV and film, and I teach songwriting. So I'm doing a lot of different things. But when I have to put out a new record, I either have to like get a record label on board or go back to work and save up money to put out the record myself, so I own the song. So it's like there's a lot of different ways to do it. And I think you'll probably hear this, or you probably already heard this over and over again, no matter whether it's acting or music or some other art form like dance. There isn't one way to do it, which is kind of cool and exciting.
I think that's probably what drives a lot of creatives, too. They're motivated and inspired by that there's a lot of different ways to get that same result that everyone is chasing. It's just whether you have the patience, the stamina, and the endurance to make it to the end, more importantly, the belief. But I think most creatives do have that belief and passion. That's what's driving them.
My manager's manager, I guess, told me, Mike Kaminsky, said, as long as you're growing, as long as you're still building on this, and he said it from more of a numbers perspective, but I think it also makes sense when you don't quantify it in a numerical way. But like, as long as you keep growing and you're seeing growth, then keep pursuing it in some capacity. That's when it maybe doesn't make as much sense to keep going with it.
Learn, love, listen, live. This is True North Story, the original podcast series. And now, back to the program.
Fell behind in your shadow, fading over time. What feels right don't come easy. Silence of goodbye. I lost myself when you lost yourself. I lost myself when you lost yourself. But I can't carry your weight down. I can't carry your weight down.
I'm on the board and the education chair for the Recording Academy in the Pacific Northwest. I'm the host committee for Upstream, this new thing that's coming out. It's like the South by Southwest of Seattle. And I'm really involved with, music in Seattle. Everything's always changing. There's always a new crop of artists coming up, and it's a daunting industry. I think it's just how it is, though.
And you, too, Kris, have a different sound. I mean, people call you a folk singer. You use string, you use orchestra with you. I mean, that's pretty unique in and of itself. I was just going to talk a little bit about your first EP, because when I ask people if they know you, they're like, oh, I love that song, Believer. Was that?
Oh, that's cool.
It had to resonate with you because it resonates with so many other people.
Stand tall, I'm a believer. Wishing for the words to carry on. Stand, fall, I'm a believer. Willing for the words to carry on. Oh, the words to carry on.
Yeah, it resonates with me. I don't remember how I actually came up with it, but I know that I said this to a guy in Nashville one time, and I said, hey, it's better to believe in something than nothing, and he's like, that's a dangerous statement. and I understand what he means by that, and I think, there always are exceptions to the rule, but I think it's good to have something that you're driving towards, something to be passionate about as kind of a rule. Personally, I like to move. I like to be doing things. And when I have goals, when I have something to believe in, it drives me that much harder. It keeps me kind of focused. Unfortunately, there's a lot of things to be moving towards. There's a lot of things happening all the time, so it's easy to get distracted in this kind of culture we're in right now. But I think the goal of like having something, a guiding light or a guiding principle or something to push towards good. And that's, I think, where Believer came from.
Well, that's why we call this True North and True North Story.
Exactly. I mean, that is what we're trying to do with True North Story, is let folks know through the guests that we have on this program some of the influences and some of the guiding lights, as you alluded to earlier, Kris, about that's driving them, steering them, that's holding them in there. It can be a lot of different things, and people need that. I mean, I think what happens if you
100%.
don't have that is you're left to the wolves. You're left to disinformation and propaganda and whatever winds of change in society are blowing that particular day. It's like, what's your anchor? What's holding you in there?
Yeah.
We got so much stuff being blasted at us from so many different directions. Information overload.
Totally.
You just had a new album that came out this year. Did you release that yourself? Did you write all the songs on it yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I was a part of all the songs. With this record, there were a lot of firsts, to be honest. I actually spent over 2 years on this record, which is a first. This was also the first time that I kind of brought in other songwriters to work with. And it wasn't necessarily like, hey, let's write specifically for my album, but it was like I went on these writing trips to Nashville and to LA a couple times just to write with people, because I just think that's so valuable. You learn so much when you write with somebody, and it's a great way to meet new people, and there's a lot of great, talented songwriters out there. I also kind of wanted to check my ego a little bit too, because sometimes I just get so focused on me when it comes to writing these songs. It was nice to bring somebody else and say, you know what, I can write maybe even better song if somebody else is involved. And so I wrote about 28 songs. Some of those were by myself, some of those were with other people, and then ended up recording. I brought them back to the band and I said, hey, let's workshop these. And we ended up recording about 15, and then keeping about 12 for the album. We actually we kept 13. There's an extra bonus track on the new vinyl, but these are literally like the best songs I've ever released, and it feels like an album, not just a collection of songs, which was another first for me.
I love that you've got it out on vinyl too.
Yeah.
What is it about vinyl, Kris, that we just long for that?
It's kind of the slowing down of your life a little bit. You have to like put the vinyl on and listen to it, and you can't really skip songs very easily. And it's a different experience. It's an experience versus like something that's in the background, which is good.
Love it. Kris, I read your bio, and it's so interesting. The descriptions: melodic dream pop, flecks of alt country and soft rock. Tell me some of your influences, some of your musical influences. What are things that you listen to? What are inspirational musicians that have impacted your creative process?
That's a tough one. There's just so many. It depends on the day. So, I mean, I've always been a big Radiohead fan. I also really like Simon and Garfunkel. I just put together this big playlist for the songwriting camp I did this summer. And like Tame Impala is like a relevant band that I put on there that I really like. Patrick Watson / Cinematic Orchestra, he kind of goes under both those names, really good. Harry Nilsson is like a classic like songwriter that I really like. The Beatles, Jeff Cab for Cutie out of Seattle here. I mean, the list could go on. I'm touring with this guy right now called Silver Torches, and he's kind of still coming up. He plays also with Young in the City, Noah Gunderson's band, and this band called Perfume Genius. So he used to have a band that was fairly regionally well known called The Globes. He's been kind of all over, and he's a really talented songwriter as well. So it kind of depends.
Tell me a little bit about your new beautiful wife, because a blog article I read, she's like a muse to you, I think. I think she brings a lot to the table for you in your creative process.
She likes to think she's a muse because she is. She's not my wife yet. She's my fiance, but she'll be my wife next August.
Okay. Congratulations.
So it's pretty stoked.
Yeah,
Thanks.
for sure.
She is kind of the yin to my yang. We're different and we're the same in a lot of ways. She really balances me out, and she has no problem checking me very quickly, which is good for me a lot of times. But not always good for me. She's listening over there. I can't tell if she is. But yeah, she's kind of in the marketing world. She works for Xbox right now, but she's been kind of in the startup world before that for a long time, and she's like a total boss, really smart, sometimes a little too smart, but also balances out with this really beautiful, soft side that she doesn't let people see very often, but I get to see, which is nice. But yeah, we've been together for about 3 years. She's been really supportive of my music, but also good at providing me with a rational perspective. I think having been together 3 years and me being in my 30s and starting to look at the next chapter of my life, it's a really interesting perspective right now for me in terms of where music sits versus, having a family and providing for that family and like some of the other things that come with that next chapter of my life. And so I'm still trying to figure out where everything's going to kind of net out in my journey, but it's exciting. It's very exciting right now.
And I'm sure that you are sort of reflective in your songwriting as well, it sounds like.
Yeah, definitely. With this latest album, I a lot of the guys in the group that I'm in, we're all going through a lot of transitions in our lives, including me right now, and including me for the last kind of year and a half, just figuring out like where things are going to go and how to kind of approach things. And so I've been pretty honest in my songwriting about that. And I think that's where the line that kind of encompasses that song, The Magic I Remember, was always in the pause. Oh, that's where the record Often in the Pause came from.
I love that. Tell me about that lyric, what that means to you.
So I guess the quote-unquote pause is, those moments of escape in the midst of movement. That's kind of how we cope, I think, and make sense of these transitions in our lives. And so I think the album's a reflection of that. The negative space.
Taking a minute just to breathe and get centered and focused.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Like grounding and like the in between times.
Don't you find it interesting, Kris, as society continues to wind tighter and tighter and relax less and less and find those pauses and those moments fewer and fewer? Voices like yours and other people out there are calling. It's like a clarion call saying, hey, we need those. That is what allows us to reset and allows us to have some peace in an otherwise extremely chaotic and noisy world. As humanity, we need that. We want that. I just find it amazing that you're speaking to that both lyrically and musically. Do you get a real positive response to that? Because I would think that there would be a lot of people that would connect with that and relate to that.
Yes, it's an interesting thing to think about because I feel like right out of the gate, from an accolade standpoint, like we're number 29 on Billboard, and we're getting some really great Spotify charts on Shazam, iTunes. Kind of, they're playing some of the songs at Sounders games. It was really cool. It was exciting, but it's interesting you say this noisy world that we live in now. It's great for a while, but I think people are always looking for the next thing, and so they kind of forget about what you've created, and sometimes without knowing it, they say things that maybe make you go, oh, it kind of makes your heart wrench. We're like, cool, so what's next? Like, what are you going to do now? Like, well, what about what I just put out? Like,
you bring up a really interesting point, Kris. Your fiance and you both work in marketing, as well as Tama and I in branding and messaging and all of that. What's really interesting about your point is the content creation piece. It's like, well, what have you done for me lately? Versus everyone wants brand loyalty. Well, you're out there, you're putting out an album of music that people can work through one song at a time and start to go, you know what, I really feel Kris. I love Kris. I'm buying Kris's stuff. I'm listening to all of Kris's albums. I'm putting his LP on my vinyl collection. You're building loyalty, but we live in a time where it doesn't seem like it's like, okay, well, where's Kris's latest single? What's he got out? What's the new stuff? How do you get loyalty in a world that always wants to know, hey, I want the latest, greatest thing? You got to create something new. Yeah.
Totally. But I'm the same way, so I'm kind of a hypocrite.
Well, we're creatures of the society that we live in. If somebody is not familiar with your music or is going to hear this podcast and go out and check out your music, what song, if you could only pick one, what song would you tell our audience to listen to of yours that you feel is your favorite song?
Oh, man, it's tough because it's like Walking in My Sleep's like it's like radio friendly, easy to listen to, and I think people would, it's pop, it's pretty poppy, so I think people would, it's approachable, I guess, is maybe the right word, maybe not exactly the right word, but it's close. I think Falling Apart would be the one I would choose.
Treading water while the tide keeps changing routes. Almost feels like I'm wasted. Paralyzed by my own dreams. Where I'm running, but my time is running out. Are we gonna start a family? Am I falling apart? Am I making a mess? Trying to play this part.
We Share the Moon, one of those two. It's hard. I don't know. It kind of depends on the day. You know?
I love We Share the Moon. I just have to say that.
I was actually sitting with my fiance, and we're talking about something, and I don't remember how we got on the topic, but she said, you know, whenever I'm probably going to butcher the story. I'm kind of nervous that she's listening if she is, but we were sitting down, and she said, yeah, when it was hard when I left Rhode Island, because she's from Rhode Island originally, but one thing my aunt said to me that really like gave me some solace was, she's like, whenever you're missing us, just look up into the sky and remember that we share the moon, and that'll make you feel closer to us, because she moved from Rhode Island when she was really young, and she's really close with her family over there. So I was like, wow, that is such a beautiful sentiment, and then it kind of stuck with me, and I ended up putting it in a song.
That's beautiful.
How can people find your music as we wrap up?
Actually, just if they search my name, Kris Orlowski, it's kind of a mouthful, Orlowski, they'll be able to find it pretty quickly. It's kind of available wherever.
Yeah, you're on iTunes, and you have your own website and social stuff.
Yep, all that stuff.
Very cool.
I'm probably going to be doing something in the new year. So I guess if people want to, like, if they're digging the stuff, just like follow me on social media so you can stay in touch, or sign up on the mailing list. That might be the best way. There is something that is pretty interesting that people may want to check out. It hasn't been announced anywhere, so this will be kind of the big announcement on this podcast. I've brought together some of my favorite producers, songwriters, and artists from Seattle, and then also Nashville and Los Angeles, to create what I'm calling like a covers and remixes album, which is just alternate versions of songs from Often in the Pause. It's basically kind of like a giant music art project. There's symphonic orchestral masterpieces on there, electronic-y like remixes, folk, rock, Americana, bluegrass, all that stuff. It's basically just different musicians covering my songs. Rocky Rodolato, the guitar player from Morrissey. There's all sorts of random different people. Budo, who's been touring with Mac. I think people are really going to be into it because it's so weird. Awesome.
Thanks for being part of True North Story.
Nice to talk to you guys.
Thank you for listening to True North Story, the series. And tune in next time for another True North Story.